With the Alabama-Florida State game being less than 40 days away, I've decided to ramp up my research upon Florida State so that I can be more prepared for the game so I can have a better idea of what they can do. Most recently, I've decided to look into the coaching staff of Florida State and figure out where they're from, and what offensive systems that they or defensive systems that they learned from, what coaches did they gain their ideology from. And of course, I'll start with the head coach because he's the one who sets the tone for the rest of the team. And Florida State, you all will know, would be Jimbo Fisher. Uh, and then I'll probably move on to the wide receivers coach and the offensive line coach after that, which would be separate videos. And the reason why is because those are two areas that I think will be question marks for Florida State, or at least areas where people want to see improvement or to see production out of their talent that they already have in those areas. But like I said, today's video is about the head coach, Jimbo Fisher, or as I learned today, whose full name is John James Fisher. First, I'll start with some of the stats for some of the things that caught my attention regarding his coaching record and things that he's done so far. Since taking over as the head coach of Florida State from 2010, he has acquired a 78 and 17 record, win-loss record there, which is second best in the nation during that time, of course, with the first being Alabama. And not only that, but it seems that he seems to have brought Florida State a long way in just a short amount of time because even his appearances in BCS and New Year's Six bowl games are only second to Alabama since I think 2011 or 2012 or something like that, which is impressive, meaning that he probably can stake the claim as the second best coach in the nation. And you don't hear a lot of people say that, which I find odd considering all that they've accomplished so far and the amount of quarterbacks and the players that they've developed to this point, which I'll talk about in a little bit. So one of the most interesting things I found out at the beginning was that Jimbo Fisher is from West Virginia, which is the same place that Nick Saban is from. They both grew up in West Virginia. And it's kind of ironic that the two best coaches in college football are from the same place. With that said, that's I guess, just the opening information about Jimbo Fisher so you can get an idea of who he is. He played quarterback in high school, and he played quarterback in college as well. He went to Salem, and he also transferred to Samford, like moving up in the ranks so that he can be seen. And eventually he ended up playing in the Arena Football League as well. And he was just an accomplished quarterback wherever he goes, which is where he gained his acumen and knowledge for teaching and developing quarterbacks. Up until the point where he became a head coach, Fisher was most well known for developing QBs. And he seems to have, just that pedigree of like having guys who come in who are even not the most talented or the best quarterback at the time, but he'll take them and make them into a better quarterback or at least a serviceable one. After he finished playing in the AFL, he became a quarterbacks coach for Auburn, but that was after he was offensive coordinator at Samford, which was his alma mater. But he did the Auburn quarterbacks coaching job from 1993 to 1998. And Auburn fans will probably remember this the most because no one knows their quarterbacks better than Auburn would, seeing as how they're irrelevant most of the time. Not just messing around. But Stan White, Pat Nix, and Damian Craig, Gabe Gross, Ben Leard, a lot of those guys, they were tutored under Jimbo Fisher when he was coaching their quarterbacks at Auburn. So some of the most decorated quarterbacks in Auburn history were taught under Jimbo Fisher. Now with Stan White, it's a little interesting because Stan White had been there since 1990, and Jimbo Fisher came in 1993. So he was there for White's last year, meaning that he probably didn't have the biggest impact on White's development per se, but he probably did help him take the last step into becoming a better quarterback. Now with Pat Nix and Damian Craig, he definitely had a big part in developing them and making them into the quarterbacks that they were. Like these are some of the most remembered quarterbacks in Auburn history. Pat Nix left Auburn as the all-time leader in pass efficiency, completion percentage. So that, not completion percentage, but the percentage in terms of pass efficiency, which is something not easy to do. Also, Damian Craig, who produced some of the biggest or the better statistical games outcomes in Auburn football from a quarterback in their history. Uh, he was taught by Jimbo Fisher. Jimbo helped him a lot because he already had the athleticism of being a dual threat quarterback. He can move, but he also had to pass as well, being a quarterback. And Jimbo Fisher helped him to refine uh, those small things needed to take the next step to being a good quarterback. I think he still has the record or something like that for most yards passed in an Auburn game. Uh, One of the first two. I don't know if he 3,000 yard passer. I'll edit it out if I need to. But I think he was the first 3,000 yard passer that Auburn had in their school history. Now the thing is, I think at the time, so not long after that, Auburn started recruiting quarterbacks. They brought in some guys who weren't as talented as the ones before. So Jimbo had his job kind of cut out for him with Gabe Gross and Ben Leard and Daniel Cobb. This is toward the end of his tenure with Auburn. He They dealt with injuries, but then guys like Ben Leard, who was struggling with consistency, he struggled with Fisher's style of coaching at the time. A lot of people would describe it as like aggressive or in your face, and he really didn't deal with that well, which I think the other quarterbacks probably responded to it better than he did. Uh, who's to say whether he's still like that now? I haven't heard much. I don't know how he was with Jameis Winston or how he was with Christian Ponder or how he was with EJ Manuel or how he is with DeAndre Francois in the present time. But at that time, he was a little bit more aggressive. He seems like a more laid back guy now, but you never know. So, but regardless of those last statements from Leard, his pedigree with just the Auburn quarterbacks is impressive nonetheless. And then he moved on to be the offensive coordinator. So he moved up from being a quarterbacks coach to an offensive coordinator at Cincinnati, and he gave them their most prolific offensive attack in the history of their program. But unfortunately for Cincinnati and to the benefit of everyone else, or for Saban, I should say, he was hired immediately the next season by Nick Saban to come to LSU, who was just starting, you know, leaving Michigan State for now LSU to begin the dynasty that we now know for LSU, how they became as successful as they have in the years of 2000s up until, recently. So he came to LSU with Saban, and he coached there for the next 6 years under Saban. And he did wonders with the LSU quarterbacks as well. No one was expecting them to be, top flight guys or to even be, I guess, prolific in a way. But with Josh Booty and Rohan Davey, uh, he made them seem like all SEC quarterbacks, which Josh Booty was named first team All SEC under Jimbo Fisher, and he was a very efficient passer. And Rohan Davey was the first 3,000 yard passer in LSU history. And this was all under Fisher's tutelage. I think his ability to connect with the player and then teach them what to do and to drop certain bad habits, I think that helped them to become better quarterbacks. Not to mention guys like Matty Muck and Randall, he managed them as well, and they continued to have many 30-plus points games, which wasn't the case under Saban a lot during that time when he focused more on the running game and pro-style offense, which now it kind of shifted a little bit. They still incorporate a lot of the same elements, but a lot more passing game focus now. And so after Saban left LSU and went to the Miami Dolphins, Fisher, of course, remained in college football, but he was hired away to be the offensive coordinator under Bobby Bowden at Florida State University, which a lot of Florida State fans will now know. They remember the time from 2007 to 2009. Jimbo Fisher was the offensive coordinator for Florida State, and he was immediately called the head coach in waiting, which is a weird title, but they basically let him know you're the offensive coordinator, but with the intention of making you the head coach when Bobby Bowden retires. And Bobby Bowden wasn't looking to retire yet, apparently, but they eventually pushed him out in 2010 because the team was they weren't having as much success as they've been having in previous years under him. And one interesting thing I noted was that being from Alabama, I know about UAB, but interestingly enough, UAB was going to hire Jimbo Fisher, but the funds were denied at the last minute by the trustees. So apparently, one of the trustees or some of the guys who are in control of the money, determining where the money goes for the football program, they didn't want Jimbo Fisher. They hired Neil Callaway instead, who infamously went on to have a 15-42 record at UAB, while Jimbo Fisher went on to have one of the better coaching careers over the last decade, as you can see. And so it would have been interesting to see where UAB's program would have went, the trajectory, how it would have changed if they had hired Jimbo Fisher instead of Neil Callaway. And also another interesting fact at this time was that Fisher was also offered the head coaching job. I mean, not head coaching job, the offensive coordinator job under Nick Saban at Alabama during that time as the offensive coordinator. So I'm assuming he was offered the job either could have been Saban's first year, but I know we ended up with Major Applewhite. But I'm assuming it was after we let Applewhite go and Nick Saban was looking for a different offensive coordinator. I'm pretty sure Nick Saban probably offered Fisher after the 2008 offseason. And we ended up getting Jim McElwain, who is now also a head coach of Florida Gators, who is a rival of Florida State. With all that said, we see that Jimbo Fisher has just a history of having success wherever he goes, and he moves up the ranks. He's spent 22 years as an assistant, but you can see the progression from being a renowned quarterback coach to offensive coordinator to being Nick Saban's offensive coordinator, who he learned a lot from, actually, which is why you see his teams at Florida State start to kind of emulate the style of a Nick Saban team. And then also his pedigree of developing quarterbacks just continued when he went to Florida State. Christian Ponder was a first-round pick. E.J. Manuel was a first-round pick. Jameis Winston was a first-round pick. We'll see what happens with DeAndre Francois. But the quarterbacks definitely, you see the trend. Wherever Jimbo Fisher goes, the quarterbacks tend to elevate their level of play as well. So you just expect good things out of quarterbacks. The issue with Florida State recently has been the offensive line and the receivers. So we'll see if that trend can flip around for them before they play Alabama. They've had success under Fisher against most of the competition that they've played, specifically within the state of Florida, which they've dominated. Every team that they've played in the state of Florida, they have a winning record against, and in a lot of cases, undefeated streaks. Jimbo Fisher is 17-1 against the rest of the state of Florida in terms of college football teams. The only loss coming to the Florida Gators, the rival, in 2012. And so he has kind of that a similar attitude to Saban, where it's like, I'm going to dominate all my rivals and barely lose. I think Nick Saban never lost to Tennessee while at Alabama. I think we've only lost to Auburn, how many times? 3 times total since being at Alabama. You can definitely see why Nick Saban liked Jimbo Fisher and why he brought him to his team and wanted to bring him back. And you can see why Florida State wanted to keep him and why they immediately made him the head coach in the midst of Bobby Bowden starting to fail. And so I basically made this video so you guys can understand the type of person Jimbo Fisher is, the impact that he has on his team, and how that may impact the game, which I'll talk about more in later videos because this video is getting too long. But thank you for watching. I'll see you for the next one.